How did life change for you from living in America to living in Kuwait?
Well, life didn't change very much. We did a lot of deployments when I was in the Marine Corps for training, so spent a lot of time in the desert. Doing deployments. Went to 29 Palms and Yuma, so it was just a little longer stay than normal deployment.
Describe your daily job as a corporal.
Well, the daily job once we got in country was finding our unit. So after we found our unit, we moved up to our base, got all of our ammunition stored, and started doing loadouts for the defense of Saudi Arabia for Desert Shield. Basically, you get up in the morning and see what they want for the aircraft to fly for that day, and you build up the ordnance and get it delivered to the flight line, and then usually take a break at lunchtime because it's about 130 degrees, and then get back to doing that after it cooled off a little bit. And then after a little bit of break, after a regular work day, you get up at whatever time, maybe midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, and do security.
Can you tell me about an experience that caused you to feel the positive effects of the armed forces during Desert Storm?
I'd have to say was seeing the Iraqi people or the Iraqi army leaving Kuwait and seeing what they did to that country while they occupied it. They killed a lot of people and took a lot of people's possessions, and actually were attempting to leave the country and flee back to Iraq with those items, and it was nice to be able to return the Kuwaiti people back to Kuwait.
Describe the Cobra helicopter mission and your role in it.
The Cobra helicopter was basically to go anti-tank, basically destroy tanks and go after personnel or bunkers. Basically, we just kept them armed with rounds, bullets and missiles and rockets. That was pretty much our job. So, from Desert Shield, which they more of a defensive posture, to Desert Storm, which when we started going back into Kuwait and taking Kuwait back, they were actually really key because their downtime for maintenance was pretty low compared to the Apache helicopter. So the Cobra helicopter is a really good helicopter.
Describe someone who helped you during Operation Desert Storm.
Well, I had a good friend, and when we moved up to one of the cities after we moved up toward the border in Saudi Arabia, we moved up to the border in Kuwait, or close to the border. We used to get a lot of deliveries for ammunition, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. He used to always, was only a couple of us that actually would unload the stuff with the heavy equipment, so he would always volunteer to help me even though he wasn't licensed, and so I didn't have to do it all by myself, so which probably saved me maybe an hour's worth of work in the middle of the night after being woken up.
Describe how you received the news that the war was over and how you celebrated.
Well, we were in Kuwait at the time with a few other people and some of the helicopters, pilots and stuff, and basically one of the guys came up to us, the staff sergeant, came up and told us that there was a ceasefire. So, it was really not much partying because MREs aren't too fun to eat all the time. But we sat in country in Kuwait for about 5 days, waited for somebody to come get us and fly us out of there. But after getting back to our original base, it took us a few weeks to fly out. But the best part was flying back to Boston, where they had a big party and good beer.
Did the war change your perception on how you should live your life, and if it did, how?
I don't think the war changed my perception of how I live my life. I was young, went in the Marine Corps at 17, got into Saudi Arabia for Desert Shield, Desert Storm at 19, 20. I made a lot of good friends over there. I'm not saying war was fun or anything, but it's makes life a lot more simple than it is now. Good friends, a good teamwork, always looking out for each other. It's like a big family. I miss that part of it. Maybe not the war itself, but the friends I made there. It's not so much like that nowadays, maybe because I'm older or something, but I do miss the friends and the time I had in the Marine Corps.
Tell me about the training you had to endure to become a part of the EC-130H Compass Call.
Well, first I had to go through basic training, of course, which everybody has to go through in the Air Force. After basic training, I went to Monterey, California, which was a hardship tour. It was beautiful, but it was really challenging because it was a language school. I endured about 8 months of language training there, and then from there I went to Texas, and I went through cryptologic school for another 6 months. After that, I went to Washington State and went through another 2 to 3 months, almost 3 months of airborne training. After that, I finally got to Arizona, which was my final base, which is where the EC-130s are located, and had another 6 months of training to become a linguist on the Compass Call. So it was quite extensive, the amount of training involved.
Describe your daily job as a mission crew supervisor.
As a mission crew supervisor, from the time you wake up to the time you start your mission, you're responsible for the entire back-end crew, which is linguists and acquisition specialists. You basically delegate all of the tasks for the day. You delegate the frequency ranges. You delegate the targets. You basically are the point of contact for anything that goes on for that mission for the day. Once you get in the air, again, you're responsible for everything. So you are responsible for all the off-board communications. You communicate with all the other aircraft that are in the area, all the other intelligence aircraft that are in the area, to make sure you deconflict and you all know what's going on with different targets and different frequencies. You basically prioritize the targets that you want to jam, which is kind of fun. So you've got a lot of responsibility in making sure that you've got the priorities right of what's going on at that time frame in whatever operation it is that you're working with. So basically you're responsible for the entire enlisted back-end crew of the aircraft from start to finish.
Can you tell me about a memorable experience that you encountered during your years on the Lockheed EC-130H Compass Call?
One of my most memorable experiences on the EC-130H was one of our first combat missions over Iraq, and we were all very young and we were all very new, and there was a lot going on, there was a lot of tension, and we were getting shot at, and the crew started to freak out, and it took a lot to kind of bring everybody back together. And once we did, we got back together and we continued our mission, and we fulfilled our mission, and we landed safely. But that was one of the most memorable experiences because we came back together and worked together as a crew to make sure that everybody was going to be safe, and fulfill our mission at the same time. It was one of those eye-opening experiences too, that you really realize, wow, we're in war, there's a lot going on, nobody's immune, and we really need to take this seriously. So it kind of changed the dynamic a little bit because we all looked at it a little bit differently, and we looked at everything a little bit differently and appreciated life a little bit differently.
Tell me about the teamwork involved between you and the other 12 people on the EC-130H Compass Call.
Well, we were a team. There's no way to execute the mission that we were designated to execute without being a team, from the flight crew, the pilots, the flight engineers, navigators, into the mission crew. We had a mission crew commander, the crew supervisor, and then, of course, the rest of the team that did the brunt of the work, if you will. But not only that, but we also had a huge maintenance team that kept us flying. So the one thing about the military that really harps upon is that there's no one person that can do anything. It takes an entire team, an entire staff, maintenance, aircrew, pilots, I mean, you name it, to keep us going and keep us flying, to be able to perform the mission. So that's the best attribute to being a team, I think. I've never experienced something like it in my life because you can't do anything alone.
Describe a moment that made you feel the positive or negative effects of your time at war.
Actually, the biggest aspect of when I was at war, we weren't allowed to go off base much, so we didn't interact a lot with the locals. The biggest eye-opening experience was when I returned home to the States. I had just completed, I think it was 9 months overseas, and I came back to Baltimore, and I remember flying into the Baltimore airport and everybody being miserable. And I looked at everybody, I looked at people around me, and I said, how can you be so miserable? You've got everything you could possibly want. You've got stores. It was overwhelming, the amount of things that you can do in the States. And people around me just looked at it as they just didn't care. And it was an eye-opening experience of us not appreciating the things around us as much as we should. So I think more so it was an eye-opening thing coming back to the United States after being at war and seeing all the people that don't appreciate what we have for what we have. Because we can do anything, we can go anywhere, we can see anybody. There's no restrictions. You're not confined to a 1.5 mile perimeter, and you can go anywhere and do anything and buy things that a lot of people can't. So I guess that was the biggest eye-opening experience that the war brought to me.